This wedding was the first time I ever shot a full day entirely on film, with no digital safety nets and no screens to glance at mid-frame to check if you got it. Just a couple of old cameras slung over my shoulder, a few rolls of Portra 400 tucked into my bag, and a quiet kind of hope that everything I needed would be waiting there on the negatives when I got home. So a few months later, back in April, Freya and I loaded up the camper van and headed north. We gave ourselves a quiet few days in Glencoe before meeting up with them. Time to decompress, to be surrounded by the mountains, to remember how much better everything feels when you wake up in the cold air with the fog clinging to the hills and your pants drying on the wing mirror. We parked near Buachaille Etive Mor. We brushed our teeth on the roadside and slept with the doors slightly cracked to let in that morning mist and morning air. And we just existed together in the Highlands. No pressure, no emails, no jobs to tick off. It was the best possible way to prepare for what was coming, I would say. And Doug and Abbie arrived in Scotland, in Glencoe, the day before the wedding. We met by a little creek tucked into the base of these mountains, and it was a quiet spot that I guess reminded them a little bit of home. There was something about the mossy rocks and the dark water that gave off that kind of Pacific Northwest energy. It wasn't as grand as the Cascades or Rainier, but there was still something familiar in the shapes and the textures, and they seemed to relax into it. We wandered, we chatted a little bit, we shot bits of film, and we took in the air. There's no pressure to perform or pose or force anything, and that couple of hours felt sort of like an exhale, like the start of something that already felt natural. The real start, though, came the following morning, wedding day. We met them again at sunrise, back at Buachaille Etive Mor. The four of us, Doug, Abbie, Freya and I, walked through the fostered grass together as that first light sort of crept over the mountain ridge, and for a while we just took photos. Not wedding photos, not couple portraits, just photography. Doug and I walked slow, swapping lenses, lining up landscapes like we were two mates on a trip, not two photographers preparing for a wedding. It was such a simple way to begin the day, and it kind of anchored everything that followed. From there we started making our way west, headed across to Skye, where the elopement would properly take place. It's not a quick drive from Glencoe to Skye, but it did give us a little time to reset. On the way, we stopped off at a little florist where Abbie picked up her bouquet. She came out of the shop flashing a peace sign, bouquet in one hand, and just massive grin on her face. And it was one of the moments that stuck with me, not because it was grand or styled or posed, but it was just so pure. It was just Abbie completely herself, buzzing about what was coming. Doug and Abbie were staying at a hotel on Skye. And when we arrived, instead of getting ready separately, they decided to get ready together. No big reveal, no suspense, just the two of them, helping one another with earrings, perfume, buttonholes. It was intimate and quiet and surprisingly moving. There was something incredibly special about watching them exist in that space, connected to each other, no nerves, just softness. I shot the entire thing on the Pentax 6.7 and my Contax G1, which you can see here, both loaded with Portra. There was technically a digital backup, but that was all Freya. I didn't shoot a single frame digitally, it was all film. And that decision shaped everything, the pacing, the rhythm, the way I framed each shot and the moments I chose to just let be. Once they were ready, we loaded into Doug's rental car and drove to the Quiraing. I scouted the location ahead of time, as I've been there countless times before, made sure we had enough space, enough quiet, enough view, and as we walked up, we passed crowds of hikers and tourists. And the wildest thing was, is every single one of them just like stepped aside. They gave us space without ever being asked. There were no awkward stares, bar a few at the top. No phones being pointed at the couple, and just this collective understanding that something meaningful was about to happen. And it really was. Doug and Abbie walked a little bit further away from us and said their vows in private, silhouetted against the sky. I stayed back with Freya and we just sort of let it be theirs. There were no interruptions, just the sound of the wind and the soft rustle of fabric against rock. When they rejoined us, we cracked open a bottle of champagne and sprayed it along the ridgeline, all of us laughing, freezing, slightly damp. And we started packing up, thinking that we'd call it a day. And then the light kind of shifted, and I couldn't ignore it. It was dropping quite fast. It was around 7 p.m. at this time, but it hadn't gone yet, but it was going. And I knew that if we left right then, we could make it to Sligachan before the sun completely disappeared. I floated the idea, just casually, no pressure, just a maybe. But Doug didn't hesitate and Abbie didn't blink. They looked at each other, shrugged, and went, "Fuck it, let's go." So we went. No one had eaten. We were all slightly cold, running off a bit of adrenaline, but we jumped back in the car and drove as fast as we could across Skye. And we made it to Sligachan with barely half an hour of light left, and it was magic. The kind of magic you can't plan or recreate. The light was streaking across the valley and the peaks were glowing. The haze in the background gave everything this soft, dreamlike depth. I shot wide, I shot close. They wandered through the emptiness. They held each other in this quiet. One frame, which is something I don't normally gravitate towards, was under the veil, but the way the light poured through the fabric made it feel like its own little world. And Doug's favourite shot from the whole day came from that moment. A frame of Abbie, backlit, hands clasped, dress glowing, and the 55mm on the Pentax flared just right. No tricks, no edits, just pure timing and trust in the gear. That night, after everything had been done, we went for a curry. We walked into the restaurant, still wearing wedding clothes, looking like we just stepped off a magazine cover and into the local curry house. They ordered the brightest red and orange curries you've ever seen. Everyone stared. No one said anything. We were too tired to care. It was just perfect. And over dinner, I had one last idea to throw at them. I said, what if we woke up at 3 a.m. and hiked the Old Man of Storr at sunrise? One more shoot, just us. One last chance to get something double special. I didn't really expect them to say yes, but without even thinking again, they were in. So Freya and I parked the camper in the hotel car park. We slept in the back, they slept in their room. We woke before the world stirred and drove over to the base of the Storr. Doug wore his suit for the climb and Abbie tucked her dress into her rucksack. And in the blue-grey cold of the early morning, we hiked. No one said much on the way up, just the sound of boots on rock and the wind weaving through the cracks. At the top, we maybe shot for 40 minutes. The sun rose quick and hard, and golden hour dissipated faster than you could really think about it. Abbie didn't redo her hair, there was no makeup artist, just wind and height and the texture of the Highlands. We kept our distance to show the scale, to let the mountains breathe, and one of the first frames shows them both, tiny at the top, with a film burn across the bottom, completely alone in this vast, ancient place. Another, Abbie is turning and her dress is catching the light, translucent in the morning sun. And then it was over. She packed her dress back into her bag, Doug took off his jacket, and we hiked back down. We hugged pretty aggressively in the car park to say goodbye, and Freya and I drove home. There's nothing else that I've done that's felt quite like that. It was more than a shoot, it was more than a wedding. It was this strange little moment of life where everything aligned. Friendship, landscapes, trust, photography, all held together by these fragile strips of film. And it is wild to think that this was my first time going all in on film. So yeah, that was it. Not just a wedding, not just a job, but this rare, honest experience that reminded me why I care so much about all of this. About film, about people, about showing up and fully paying attention. Doug and Abbie gave me something I will never forget. Not just because the photos came out how I hoped, but because they trusted me completely to tell their story the way I saw it. And that kind of trust stays with you. And if this was the start of a new chapter, I'm glad it began with them.